Welcome back, everybody. Today's July 1st, 2025. Born on this date in 1961, nine-time Olympic gold medalist Carl Lewis, who was born in Birmingham. Today we're going to have AL.com's Kelly Kasich on the show to talk about a couple of old Alabama murder cases that seem to be missing one vital part of every murder case: the actual dead person. First, we have news items on Africanized honeybees, a new pedestrian traffic pattern at a famous intersection, and what happened with that request for a judge to intervene on the new hemp law. I'm Mike Morgan, and we're down in Alabama.
"16 years from today, Greg Gerstner will finally land the perfect cannonball. Epic splash. Unsuspecting friends. A work of art only possible because Greg is already meeting all these same people at AARP volunteer and community events that keep him active and involved and help make sure his happiness lives as long as he does. That's why the younger you are, the more you need AARP. Learn more at aarp.org/local.
Another swarm of Africanized honeybees has been collected and euthanized in Alabama, reports AL.com's Mike Cason. Now, last year, swarms were collected and euthanized in Jackson and St. Clair counties. Beekeepers in Barber County this year discovered the latest feral swarm in the state. According to the Alabama Department of Agriculture and Industries, the department is now placing traps in a 5-mile radius around where they were found, just in case. Now, although honeybees aren't native here at all, it's the European honeybee that we're most familiar with, and this supplies us with the good stuff. Africanized honeybees are a hybrid of the European and African honeybee varieties. Besides threatening their European cousins, they're famously more aggressive and can pose more danger if disturbed. Now, the good news is that either variety, European or Africanized, will leave you alone if you don't disturb them. But if you do disturb them, the Africanized breed are known to send out many, many more bees that chase you farther than the European breed does. Now, if you think you spot Africanized bees, don't watch 1978's The Swarm. Instead, call the State Apiary Protection Unit at 334-240-7228 or 334-240-7172. There's a pedestrian traffic pattern that might be new to some people, and it's coming to one of the most famous intersections in the state. AL.com's Jerry Humphrey III reports that the city of Auburn will be changing up the stop-and-go patterns at the intersection of College Street and Magnolia Avenue, which you know is Toomer's Corner. The city's putting in an X-crossing crosswalk pattern. Now, in some places, that's also known as a pedestrian scramble, which sounds more exciting and perhaps more terrifying than it actually is. Traffic lights will stop all vehicle traffic at once, allowing pedestrians to cross a street or even cross the intersection diagonally before the lights turn green again. Now, obviously, this keeps walkers who are catty-corner from their destination from having to cross two streets at different times to get where they need to go. They just scramble right on across the middle. Easy enough. Now, drivers who safely navigate this intersection are then eligible to attempt the Figure 8 roundabout at Highways 87 and 167 in southern Pike County and not end up in Selma when you're on your way to Enterprise. A member of the Washington Post team that covered Roy Moore's campaign and scandal during the 2017 Senate race has been charged with possession of child pornography, reports AL.com's William Thornton. Now, Moore spent the latter part of that campaign fending off allegations that he had relationships with inappropriately young women and girls during the 1970s when he was around 30 years old. Moore has continued to deny those accusations, and he lost that election to Doug Jones, the only Democrat to win a statewide election in nearly 20 years. The Washington Post won a Pulitzer off the reporting of the story. Now, the FBI arrested and searched the home of Thomas Pham LeGros, a member of the Post's video department who was on that Pulitzer winning team, and arrested him on Thursday. Investigators say they found 11 videos on his work laptop that were child sexual abuse material. The New York Post reported that LeGros was placed on leave by the Washington Post. And a Montgomery County Circuit judge denied the request by 4 businesses to block part of the new state law on hemp products, reports AL.com's Mike Cason. Now, that means that the part of the law in question goes into effect today. It bans the sale and possession of all smokable hemp products, and it bans products containing THC made from a synthetic process, such as gummies or drinks. Violations are a Class C felony, meaning punishment can be up to 10 years in prison. Let's take a quick break, come back, and talk with Kelly Kasich about some old Alabama murders that weren't. Y'all stay with us.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Hey, thanks for staying with us, everybody. Today, we're going to welcome Alabama author, reporter, Southern humorist Kelly Kasich to Down in Alabama Studios. How are things in your world, Kelly?
Great. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good.
Okay.
That Southern humorist label, we kind of own that in the South, right? You don't hear Northern or Western humorists.
Well, now there used to be like some Midwest humorists, but yes, it's definitely the South loves to make fun of itself, I think. So in a good way, not in a bad stereotypical way.
I remember hearing a comedian explain that a comedian tells funny stories and a humorist tells stories funny.
I consider myself a humorist because I don't do a lot of humor live. I write columns. So, or,
Right.
so that's why I use the word humorist. I'm definitely not a comedian.
Yeah, the Louis Grizzard thing where it's beyond. We're not talking about a stand up. We're
Right.
talking about just somebody who deals in funny stuff. Um, well, I love your stories on AL.com, the Alabama mystery stuff and quirky history anecdotes, and they're expected, or should I say, they're unexpected, and they teach us a little of our history. Now, I'm just going to tell this sort of little side note that I've told people. I heard, and I don't know if you have, working in newspapers, you may have come across the same phrase. The phrase "Hey Martha." I've heard it as "Hey" with other names as well. But the idea is the old man sitting at the breakfast table, coffee and eggs over easy, reading the paper, and in the middle of all the same old news, there was something that he didn't realize he needed to know, and he couldn't keep it to himself. So he says, "Hey Martha, did you
Did he
see this in
know?
the
Right.
paper?"
Yeah, I actually, believe it or not, have never heard it called "Hey Martha," but I do love that, and that is one of the things with my quirky history. I just love to catch people with something interesting and entertaining. So,
I'd like you to tell us about a couple of stories that you've reported and written about fairly recently. They jumped out to me earlier this summer, and they show us how a person can find themselves in trouble for killing somebody who may or may not be good and dead.
exactly.
Can you tell us about Bill Wilson?
Well, you know how I think everybody who reads my stuff can imagine that I love rabbit holes and love going down them. And often I go so far down them, it's hard to get back out. But in this case, after I had found the story of Bill Wilson several years ago, who was wrongly convicted of a crime in the 1900s, I continued looking and found another case of a person who was charged with killing someone who wasn't dead. And so I wrote about the two of those, and there are probably plenty more, but these are the ones I found during my research, and they're pretty interesting. Bill Wilson was from Blount County, and in 1912, someone just happened to find some bones by the Warrior River. And, a lot of people thought, well, maybe they're Native Americans, and nobody would have gone any further except this one sort of nosy resident who said, hey, Bill's wife and his 19-month-old daughter supposedly left town in 1908. I bet they didn't really leave town. I bet he killed them. And that's basically how it started, which is kind of ridiculous.
And so I love how everybody just, oh, those are Indian bones, but
Right, right.
everything always is what Indians left. But we found out that the family actually did indeed leave town.
Well, the couple had three children, and
Uh,
they and Jenny, the mother, took the 19-month-old, and the older children stayed behind. So when this nosy man in town decided, he must have killed them, the county attorney got involved and said he must have killed them. So that he went to trial. He went to trial. He said, they left, but and here's something that's really funny to me. The woman's sister testified in court, hey, I just saw her a couple weeks ago. And there were people who said, that couldn't have been their bones. They weren't deteriorated enough. They were really, really old. So it's just a really interesting that with all of that, they still found Bill Wilson guilty of murdering his wife and daughter.
well, thank goodness science has come along a little bit since then. Since those bones kind of look like they're a little old, don't they?
Right. And I mean, thank goodness for forensic files, right? Now we all know.
Right. Well, so they actually thought they had a body in this case. Well, because was one thing for sure that I learned from, let's see, lots of movies, but uh, I'll think of the Fanny Flag book.
Oh, the
Um,
fried green tomatoes.
yeah, some fried green tomatoes is if you can kill somebody, and if you get rid of the body, you might be innocent.
Exactly, exactly. And it used to be that way. And I'm sure it's hard now to prove someone guilty if there's no body. But in this case, they couldn't even prove that these remains were those of the people he was convicted of killing. So,
Right.
do
Right.
you want to know the really interesting conclusion?
Yes.
Well, good old Bill Wilson went to prison Christmas 1915. In July 1918, a woman walks up and says, hey, I'm Bill's wife, and here's her daughter who's now 11. And we just moved away. We divorced and moved away. And I just now heard about this trial. And they decided, okay, they're going to let Bill Wilson out of prison at that point.
Oh, way to go. Bill got out. Playing into this is the possibility, possibly is the whole shock behind divorce back then, maybe.
I don't know. It's really funny because we all know that in society, I think divorce was really um, looked down upon then. But I see it more often in sort of the pioneer people and just ordinary people. I still see divorces in the historical things I look in. So,
Yeah, I'm always when I see a divorce in the 1800s, I'm like, well, I thought didn't they shoot you for that back then?
I guess it just depended on who you were.
And who you knew, what
Yeah,
you could get
yeah.
away with, and if you have another town to move to.
Right, exactly.
And she did.
She did.
Well, you had another anecdote you said, Michael Mayer in the story you did.
Right. This one is even more fishy because this man, there were no remains found. So, um, these come from a newspaper, the Coleman Tribune, back in 1905. And one of the headlines says, I'm going to read this one to you. One of the headlines says, a very strange disappearance. Mike Mayer is missing and foul play is suspected. Arrests made. Trial is going on. So, very quickly after this man was not seen around town, his wife and two house guests were put on trial for killing him. And now we are, this is, everybody knows the same thing. Mike lived there. Mike's not there at the moment. These people are charged with his death. And I have no idea how they got to that point. But thankfully, Mike Mayer returned and said, I was looking for a job in Birmingham and I'm back now. Before they were convicted, they were charged, but they were not convicted. So the little tidbit about him coming back had the headline, Risen from the Dead.
Well, yeah, you can't. You have to go with that.
Right.
You couldn't
Exactly.
miss that headline in those days.
Exactly.
That's so awesome. I love you have in the in from the one of the stories the article. No positive evidence has been brought up to this time. A murder was committed. Well, no, the guy's alive.
Right. There was absolutely no evidence in either case. But, in Mike Mayer's case, there's something going on in the background that was not in the newspaper articles because he didn't live with his wife any longer and he divorced her. So something may have been going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, you always wonder about politics and this stuff too. Was this someone who the townspeople didn't like, and so they were ready for him to murder somebody? We always knew
Exactly.
he'd do it.
It could be.
Yeah, we always knew he'd do it.
He was up to no good.
Okay, and another this obviously could be another case where hush hush about divorce proceedings could have affected whether how the truth was circulated.
Exactly. You never know. Small towns, small town gossip. Could have been all kinds of things going on.
Well, you are a prolific teller of these stories. What other stuff are you working on right now? What can we look forward to, or that you want to point out?
I'm always looking for weird things. Like I've written about, there are three men in Alabama who were buried in their feather beds. And I'm going to assume this was in the 18 and early 1900s. I'm going to assume the feather beds are no longer there, but they were, and one man with his slippers underneath the bed. So I'd like to write about, I don't know, I just find these little odd things with odd qualifiers, with just these unusual situations and write about them. And for instance, today I have a story about five women who were mass murderers in the 1950s. They were, used insurance fraud and poisoned their families and friends to death. So, you know,
Five in Alabama.
right. The
Yeah.
1950s were apparently a big period for that. And because the insurance laws were changed, because you used to be able to I could take out life insurance on you, Ike, not tell you, not have you sign anything, and then kill you and keep the money. And
Before you do that, let me just move out of state and let people assume that I'm dead, and then
okay.
we can come up cut some kind of deal.
Okay, all right. No, but I mean, isn't that terrible? I mean, it's, you could do that. And there was, the Reverend Willie Maxwell down in Alex City did that, killed a lot of people. He was known as the voodoo preacher, using their insurance. And it's just strange. And they finally rewrote the law that the person had to sign and the person had to be aware they were insured for millions of dollars. So hopefully that's cut that out.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. Well, Kelly, thanks for stopping by and sharing these stories with us. And I hope we'll do this again sometime.
Yeah, anytime. I like to share news of the weird with the world. I think it's gives people something interesting and something to talk about at dinner parties.
Yeah, yeah. You're learning, and it's sort of a cathartic escape at the same
Right,
time. But
right.
you're staying in the real world.
Exactly.
I think we escape the real world too much sometimes, but I, that's why I like the funny history stuff.
Right. Me too.
All right. Well, thanks everybody out there for listening to us. We are going to be back here bright and early in the morning. Until then, come by and see what we're doing anytime you want to on the internet at al.com.